Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, veterans, dedicated and VA employees. I thank you as always for coming back to the channel. For those again who don't know, Attorney Matthew Lang here, VA accredited attorney, years of experience in the VA and years of experience outside the VA, working within VA disability. I'm going to do a special video this week where we talk about VA disability. Normally I try to post a video every Tuesday so we have something to discuss and talk about and learn from. As always, I mentioned that this is a platform to gain more information, more knowledge, so that we can have a easier process for both veterans and VA and any representatives who are assisting out there. And then, of course, one day have it so smooth that I am put out of a job, and I'd be okay with that if the process didn't need me. That's the ultimate goal here. So in that goal, I want to do this extra video because the Office of Inspector General, the OIG for the VA, issued two reports this week. Two reports, I think, that really outline, again, the consistent errors the VA makes year after year after year after year after year after year. I know the VA takes a lot of steps to create solutions and trying to make things better, but I also know that there's a lot of steps that aren't probably taking and maybe should be, as well as kind of pointed out really by the OIG reports over and over again. We see the same issues, and it mainly involves training and resources, no matter what the topic is. So I want to do this video about these two reports. I'm going to break the two reports up into multiple videos, so hopefully these videos don't go too long. And today I want to talk about the report that's titled Staff Incorrectly Processed Claims When Denying Veterans Benefits for Presumptive Disabilities under the PACT Act. The other report is also a PACT Act benefit issue as well, where there were errors. VA, I want to do my best not to beat you up here. I'm frustrated, honestly, reading through both these reports. It's really a hard read for me as a veteran myself, as somebody who advocates for veterans and somebody who wants to make a difference. Why is it hard? Because again, I continuously see the same errors. I'm beginning to wonder why I'm seeing the same errors. I'm wondering why we can't seem to get the foundation figured out, why we can't get the basics of VA law figured out. Is law complicated? Is it complex? Sure, it can be. But when it gets complex and complicated, we need to look to the foundation. We need to look to the basics, and we need to try to understand what we're doing. It's not helpful at all, as I feel, and in my professional opinion, to take a guess, click a button, and shove a file out the door. By doing so, we end up with reports like this from the OIG. So let's talk about this. And in doing so, again, I'm going to provide some training here for your VA. In VA, if at any point down the road you feel that more training would be helpful, and maybe training from an attorney, say, and somebody with experience within the VA who is trained and mentored already, I would be happy to sit down and have a conversation and see how we can help each other better. So let's talk about this PACT Act. The report goes in to tell what the OIG reviewed and so forth, and what they found, and lays things out, and some definitions in those different types of errors that they look at, so forth. There's definitely a good bit of knowledge in here, and I like the way the OIG has really laid this out, because again, they address the basic. They went to the basics. They went to the foundation when they discussed, which I think is greatly appreciated. The PACT Act in itself, understand the PACT Act and again, a whole section in here about this, but I want to keep it brief. The PACT Act's purpose ultimately was to provide more presumption for veterans. Veterans who served in specific locations and who have suffered from specific conditions and diseases. This list added to a lot of presumptions that were already out there. It definitely helped still with Agent Orange, Impact, and Gulf War veterans as well. Its whole purpose was to serve the veterans more, serve you veterans more, and provide you with more benefits than what you've ever had before. Unfortunately, seems the VA is struggling with it. Not in every aspect. They're still good as come out of it, and a lot of good actually, but we still have some struggles. So the PACT Act was signed into law August 10th of 2022. Here's what the OIG lays out in a little timeline here in the report. By December 5th and 19th, the PACT Act claims processor training was made available to VA employees. Things move slow in the government. I get it. September, October, November, December. We can see when Congress has presented a bill. We can see when they're voting on it. It's all public knowledge. It's all on the internet. I'm a little concerned that some training took that long, honestly, to get out, but fine, I get it. The government's not designed to move fast. But that training came out with less than a month of January 1, 2023, where the PACT Act claims processing fully began. Dedicated VA employees, I'm sorry. Your upper echelon clearly, by this report, gave you just days to figure stuff out. When that happens, I would encourage you, again, look at the basics of the law. Understand the basic foundation of VA disability law, and work your way up from there. Because it's all this law is. It's basic foundation that just added a little extra opportunity for veterans. By January 6th, according to the OIG's timeline here, January 6, 2023, the deadline for initial PACT Act training. So the VA's deadline was January 6th, which was almost a week after the claims had already been initiated. It's what it is. I'm sorry, dedicated VA employees, that the training wasn't likely speedy enough. Its deadline was after. But again, I'm not here to beat anybody up. I'm really here just to help you understand what to do in this situation, because the VA's always operated like this, unfortunately, in my experience. Government, as we were told in law school, even was designed to intentionally be slow, to not make speedy decisions. That's just the way everything was designed. So now that we understand one thing that occurred there in the timeline, PACT Act is signed into law, August 10th of 2022. And by January 1, the PACT Act claims processing fully began in 2023. So there wasn't a whole lot of time in between the two dates. So let's look at this here. The OIG report goes into an idea of what the rating process is, and it talks about guidance on obtaining examinations or medical opinions. And why does it talk about that? Because from what I've gleaned from this, is one of the biggest problems, if not the biggest problem and biggest error, was overdevelopment of medical opinions and examinations by VA. VA basics. This is basic, and I'm not clear why the basics are so hard. So let me try to break it down again, because this is, as I've mentioned in other videos, exams have usually been number one, if not in the top 5. Errors ever since I joined the VA, probably back in 2008, and today, maybe even top 10 if we want to give it some credit, but it's been up there. When I joined the Board of Veterans Appeals there for my brief stint, that was one of the first things they noted in their training, was that the number one remand issue was exams. So even at their level, they constantly seen the error over and over, year after year. So let's do this. Let's get the basics. Before I do that, though, let me point out really what the OIG had summarized and found in this report here. So in their sampling of claims that they did for the PACT Act, they identified errors that resulted in an estimated $1.4 million of unnecessary costs associated with unwarranted examinations and medical opinions from April 1, 2023 through September 30th, 2023. $1.4 million of unwarranted examination. money that could have been allocated potentially elsewhere to help better the system. The overdevelopment cost $1.4 million, and that's just on this sampling of PACT Act. And understanding that if VA exams are number one or one of the main errors that occur in the overdevelopment, can you imagine the millions, the billions of dollars that are spent in the wrong location? I mean, we've even seen in the news already multiple times, and Congress has not been thrilled about it, that the VA's budget is completely out of whack and they've overspent. Well, maybe we're looking in the wrong spot. Perhaps we should consider all that money being spent on overdevelopment. Could be other areas too, but I think it's worth pointing out, VA, your actions, whether you see it or not from working inside, actually have a huge impact on the outside world. Veterans, it impacts their daily living. It impacts their benefits. It impacts the way the government spends the money in order to provide for the veterans' care. It impacts so much. So please understand that when you do develop a claim, VA, go to the basics. Think about the basics. I really think when we think about the basics, we could save some of this money. We can really put that money towards a better use than just wasting it on unnecessary exams. The report also noted that the team identified underpayments totaling about $56,700 for just 2 veterans. Over $56,000 between 2 veterans of underpayment. 2 veterans. That's just 2. Now, they didn't sample every PACT Act claim, but out of their sampling, if that stayed true, could you imagine again the thousands of dollars that veterans you are not receiving for your benefits because VA doesn't understand the processes? VA, think about what that's like. Many of you are veterans as well. Many are veterans. Would you want your claim to be underdeveloped, overdeveloped? Do you want your claim to not pay you correctly? Do you want to be shortchanged $56,000 more or less? I would imagine not. So take care, please. Take care. Let's take a quick look at this exam issue here, and let's talk about the basics now, because that's the big piece of the report here, I feel, is that training issue there. The report goes in to talk about the guidance of obtaining examinations or medical opinions here. I think they do a really good job of actually laying it out. They lay out all the elements. So what's the elements? Well, VA, here's the basics. This is where the basics lies. Before I give you these elements, let's talk about the basics, what I've talked about in other videos. When we do service connection, the foundation, the basic of VA law is 3 elements. Whether you're talking direct, presumption, secondary, whatever theory it may be, 3 elements. I used to tell individuals I trained and mentored this. When you get confused and you get stuck and you feel like the law is complicated, think of these 3. 1, in-service occurrence or event. 2, a current diagnosis. 3, a nexus or a link between current diagnosis and the in-service occurrence or event. That's it. That's all it is. That's VA law right there. I'm done. No, not really. Sure, it gets more complicated sometimes than that, but that's the basics. And why do I mention the basics? Because those 3 basics help you understand when to request a medical opinion or exam. It's been laid out in the courts more than once. It's in your manual. They talk about those cases. I know they're there. I've read them. I knew that manual inside and out. I still do. I trained it. I lived by it. Is it always accurate? Sure, no. But the references are accurate. So let's talk about this. Element 1, competent medical evidence of a current diagnosed disability or recurrent symptoms of a disability. So when we talk about current diagnosis, VA, you don't need the actual diagnosis in itself to schedule the exam. The courts have said that. Veterans are not typically medical professionals, but we do know when there's something wrong with us. We know when we're suffering from a series of symptoms that could be potentially a diagnosis. So when you have competent evidence of recurring symptoms even, or that diagnosis, your element's met. That's number one. Number two, a disease, injury, or event that occurred, again, during military service. That's our in-service event or occurrence. Guess what? It's listed in the presumption. It's listed in the PACT Act in this case. It's listed the location. Did the veteran serve there? Is it? Can we put them in that location? Yeah. All right. Well, you got two elements now. Those are two elements. Now, guess what? Element three. That link. It's the link, right? The basic foundation of it all. Element three, a possible link between the current disability and the disease, injury, or event during military service. Is it possible that the symptoms that the veteran is suffering from, say, could be asthma, could be sinusitis, could be rhinitis? I'm going to use those three because those are the big ones I see all the time. And when the veteran has served in a qualifying location in the Gulf War, is it not plausible that those two are connected? Well, heck yeah, the law says so. They call it presumption. It's more than plausible. But think about it. Do I need to schedule the examination at this point? No, because the exam is trying to confirm whether that possible link is at least as likely as not. But guess what the law just did for you? A presumption of the law presumes the link already exists. Therefore, a medical opinion should not be needed. Now, that's the basics. That is very basic. Can we make arguments on some other laws and rules and regulations and exceptions? Okay. Right. And I preach it all the time. There's always an exception to the main rule. But I want you, VA, to look at the basics. When you're not clear or you're not sure, look at the basic. The basic principles of service connection are the same basic principles that are essentially used to determine if a VA exam is needed or not. Everything relies on these basic principles. When we build a house, we build a foundation, we build walls, we build a roof. We know those are the basic principles of a shelter, a house of sorts. Now, do we tend to go in and repaint the walls a different color, update the furniture? Sure. And we do the same with the law. The law has a basic foundation and purpose, and we will go in and make changes to help upgrade and make it look better if we can, and to provide more comfort and benefit to those who deserve it. In this case, veterans. So VA, I don't want to beat you up 100% here. I don't want to beat you up at all. I just want you to understand the basic, and that's what we're going to take from here. Because really that's what the OIG found is millions of dollars are being spent on unnecessary exams. And I don't see it just in PACT Act claims. I see it in all your claims that would come to my desk. I see it over and over. I have got into arguments with regional offices trying to point out the lack of need for these exams. And it's very clear that the higher echelon doesn't understand the basics either. So that's what I want to do. I want you to understand the basics. Understand the basics. When you're unsure, start over, think about the basics, and move and progress from there. You do have other tools that the dedicated employees that you get that are provided by higher levels. But one thing I want to also mention when we talk about those tools is they're only as good as, well, those who are providing them and the way they're written. The OIG report does also talk about a lot of these tools that were provided that included TARA memos and PACT Act implementation and SOPs and other interim guidances and stuff. They give you the versions of them. There's multiple versions to many of these. There's dates to them. And one thing that I find concerning here is, for example, the TARA memorandum job aid. There's 4 versions. Did you know there was 3 of them just in February of 2023 by itself? Sorry, dedicated employees. I'd be confused too what I'm supposed to do. VA, you got to do better. You got to do better. This was a job aid that was, again, more than a month after the January 1 deadline. And the act, again, we're talking now more than 5 months, maybe even almost 6 months at this point, if I do my math incorrectly. from the date that the law was implemented. But again, we know the law has already been proposed. We know when it hits the House. We know when it hits the Senate. We know when it's being voted on. You had even the time before that to even consider putting job aids together. And why you have 3 versions in 1 month. One version actually 3 days after the other one. Baffles me. So VA employees, decade employees, I do honestly appreciate you. But I want you to be trained. I want you to understand. I want you to do more, because these reports from the OIG, these look bad on you as well. It looks bad on the VA as a whole. And they're very frustrating, especially from the side of the table. It's very frustrating even from inside the walls. I know, because I was frustrated then too. But understand the basics, at least. Try to prevent some of this errors. These are just simple errors. These are basic. It's just know it. 3 elements, guys. 3 elements. So I'm begging for the veterans to please VA. Understand the basic rules. Understand the concepts. Teach yourself when, well, confusion lies in 4 versions of a job aid. You have to teach yourself sometimes. Don't always rely on others to do it, because as you can see, maybe they're not even clear on what they're teaching. Thank you, everybody, for watching this special video this week. I hope you have a wonderful week. I will make another video to talk about the other report as well of the PACT Act here soon, and I'll get that out. But it's time to get back to work and help veterans. Thank you.